Welcome back to my channel, Star Booze.
Mötley Crüe has had an excellent run. I'll be touring till I can't move anymore, and then, when they bury me, I'm still going to have a Mötley Crüe record, playing up the tube. Tommy would dig me up and use my bones as drumsticks. Mick Mars, the musician who helped construct the Mötley Crüe, is a legendary monument. With his emotionally packed performance, frightening riffs, amazing endurance, he became the silent musical. Soul of the band, born with ankylosing, Mick Mars did not walk with spondylitis, steps taken proudly and effortlessly. He moved along silent endurance and a unique, unwavering perseverance. The Mötley Crüe detonated with sold-out tours and anthems that shook the world. Few people recognized that the man standing in a quiet area of the stage, fighting terrible pain with every passing second. 40 years of commitment to a world-renowned band and then depart in hatred and litigation. A musician who dedicated his whole life to the cause, only to be shoved aside by the very he once stood by his brothers. What Mick Mars, the once essential musical, the spirit of Mötley Crüe, into a forgotten shadow, and what gave him the strength to rise and establish his own path after all the betrayal? Let's dive in. The story of Mick Mars. Early life. Mick Mars was born as Robert Allen Deal on May 4, 1951, in Terute, Indiana. A impoverished, working-class family. His parents, Tina and Frank Deal, transferred the full family to Garden Grove, California, when he was still young and hoped to find better life. In that crowded house, Marzi grew up with 4 siblings in Ann. The environment was far from stable. Mars stood out from the crowd right away. At only 3 years old, his parents took. He attended a little neighborhood fair performance. The image of country singer Skier Bon, with his guitar shining beneath the lights, left an everlasting impression on the young boy's thoughts. When they returned home, Mars firmly declared, "This will be my life." At the age of 12, his parents gave him his first guitar. The instrument was inexpensive, but for Mars it meant everything. While other children were busy with sports and festivities, Mars spent hours teaching himself to play, following along with every record by Elvis Presley and surf rock performers such as Dick Dale. At the same time, his physique's strange signals appeared. At 14, Mars began experiencing acute sensations at the base of his spine, which he couldn't explain but did not dare to share. The teenage years were spent going to school. With a tiny frame and a somewhat hunched back and a mind captivated by music. He joined the Jades, an amateur band, covering the Beatles, starting with bass before immediately transitioning to lead guitar. From school performances to late nights in Dot City bars, Mars perfected his craft dollars, every dollar. The price for his desire was steep. At slightly over 18, he sustained a significant hand injury occurred in a manufacturing accident, an accident that nearly ended his musical career before it ever began again. But Mars took a different course. He quit his job and dropped out of school and departed from a secure existence to pursue the one thing he actually believed in the guitar. Meanwhile, his illness. They moved stealthily. The discomfort became more furious, but Mars still stood on the stages of rundown bars, his face curled in agony, but his hands motionless, glided over every note. At a certain age, many were just stepping out of youth. Mick Mars understood his dreams. His musical career would not be a game. It would be a battle. A frail youngster was hurt. Hands, a body gradually giving out day by day. However, he refused to leave the planet. He had made a choice. What prevented Mick Mars from letting go, even when everything seemed to turn against him? early career. The initial years of Mick Mars' career were a long list of failures and obstacles. After leaving his physical labor job, Mars joined small bar bands in Southern California, playing blues and rock in dismal bars where the salary barely covered a single meal. Some of the most notable. During this period, the bands were white. Horse is a group that helped Mars develop air repute among the underground rock scene of Los Angeles. With his energy guitar style, note for note, riff. Replication is emotionally charged. Improvised. Solos. Mars promptly drew attention. Back then, some even mentioned his name along with another. Eddie Van is a rising guitarist in the city Halen. However, commercial ambitions killed the dream, when White Horse chose to move into disco to follow. Mars followed the trend and moved away. He realized that he wasn't born to hunt. Market tastes. He needed something fiercer, more real. In the years later, Mars played with several pop. Groups have released a few failed singles before realizing he needed a full change. He shaved and colored his characteristic mustache. His hair was jet black and transformed himself into a colder, more aggressive figure. Most importantly, he changed his name from Robert Allen Deal to Mick Mars, representing a complete rebirth of both his music and identity. In April 1980, Mars published an ad in the Recycler newspaper, "Loud, a harsh, violent guitarist is available." Only days later, Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee Too Young, determined musicians, have reached out to him. They were immediately hit. Mars's chilly personality is razor sharp. Gaze, crushingly powerful chords. It was, Mars also offered the name Mötley Crüe, recalling a past comment by someone. White Horse was once described as a MLY.looking crew. That name, along with their ferocity sound and rebellious image, rapidly became iconic. During the first rehearsals, when Mars's guitar burst into life, other members realized they had found the missing piece, which was irreplaceable. Mars wasn't only a guitarist. He was a musical engine, an anchor that held a band together that was about to burst in ways even they could not have predicted. A man in his early 30s, limping due to spinal discomfort, standing among three 20-somethings, yearning for glory. Will he have the strength to not only to keep up, but to lead them to the top? Mötley Crüe achieved success. Mötley Crüe's career rocketed almost immediately after their formation, 1981. In the era of heavy metal bands crowded the Sunset Strip. The Mötley team distinguished out with its raw sound, subversive images, and defiant attitude. However, few mentioned the truth. It was Mick Mars's deep, chilly guitar tone. That provided the band with a lot of musical weight during those early years. Their first album, Too Fast for Love, 1981, originally self-released, bore Mars's imprint. Simple but catchy. Riffs strong. Hooks that underpinned the band's wild, impulsive style. With this record, the Mötley Crüe rapidly created a loyal fan base and signed with Elektra Records in 1982. The true breakthrough occurred with Shout at the Devil. In 1983, Mars gained a denser and darker sound, combining traditional hard rock with the intensity of heavy metal. Tracks like Looks That Kill and Too Young to Fall in Love clearly demonstrated his ability to create riffs that could control a stage with only a few basic notes. From 1985 until 1987, Mötley Crüe hit their commercial peak. Theater of Pain, 1985 included. The hit Home Sweet Home is a ballad fueled by Mars's subtle chords and gloomy guitar layers. Girls, Girls, 1987 elevated the band's bad boy image to its excessive. Here, Mars was playing filthy, gritty, and heavy blues. Inspired, particularly on tracks such as Wild Side and You Are All I Need. By 1989, Dr. Feelgood was issued by the band. Most successful record, peaking at Billboard 200. Under the output of Bob Rock and Crue's sound became tighter. Mars demonstrated the summit of technique and emotion in songs like Kickstart My Heart and Without. Combining raw power and smooth heartfelt solos. Through it all, Mick Mars wasn't simply playing guitar, he was the musical base of Mötley Crüe, keeping the band's sound together. The other members plunged into scandals involving drugs, alcohol, and the media. In interviews with Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee were frequently the focus of attention. Vince Neil was the frontman of the band. However, Mick Mars modified their chaos as transformed into vibrant, breathing music, on stage and in the studio. Meanwhile, ankylosing spondylitis continues to ravage his body. Mars became more hunched. Every year moved slower after every tour. While his bandmates partied, at night he silently returned to his hotel room, battling agony that has lasted until dawn. A little-known truth: Mick Mars rarely performed at Motley. The Crue's wild adventures. He was the only member who kept away from major scandals. However, due to this, the gap between him and the rest of the band became even wider. Success came as a storm. But for Mick Mars, those years, it was a twofold battle. One for his career and one for his very being. Illness, pain, and loneliness. As Mötley Crüe rose higher on the charts, Mars' body moved in the opposite direction. At 17, he was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, is a persistent type of arthritis that gradually fused spine. It started with dull backaches. Then, sleepless nights and mornings where just rising up took everything he had. The condition not only limited his movement, but gradually damaged his physique, caused Mars to lean over and shrink. He lost about 7 centimeters of his former height. However, Mars never talked about the suffering on stage. When the lights turned on, he stood there, head sunk low, grasping his guitar as a substitute spine. The body was quietly dropping. Apart. Every tour was an actual war. Long flights, back-to-back performances, countless hours on a tour bus. Each was a nightmare for a man whose spine was collapsing vertebra by vertebra. But Mars hardly complained. Rather, he endured silently, hiding the anguish behind a hardened exterior. Unlike his bandmates, they drowned in alcohol and drugs. Mars lived calmly, amidst many festivities. He was not close to Vince Neil. He wasn't. I bonded with Tommy Lee. He shared little. Aside from the music, Nikki Sixx has other interests. For more. Over the last 2 decades, Mick Mars, essentially a single figure within he was instrumental in forming the band. In his autobiography, The Dirt, Mars admitted that had slipped into a deep depression. A tone day, he drank extensively to numb the pain, gradually getting dependent on opioid painkillers. There was even one Mars was drunk and desperate that night. I walked into the ocean with the intention of finishing it all, only to wake up soaking, freezing, wondering if he was still alive or already a ghost. During the 1990s, his condition ultimately caused him to have hip replacement surgery. The anguish has eased, but the loneliness remained. Mick Mars was the only member that hunted by the media, but not plastered on magazine covers. For the public, he was the unusual one, the silent man, and the darkness Mötley Crüe, even if it was his, the guitar that genuinely preserved the band's soul alive, a conflict that lasted over 40 years, battling sickness and battling loneliness, struggling to be, heard without at least once surrendering, betrayal and legal battles. In 2022, following more than 4 decades of struggling with his band and against Mick Mars, suffered a horrific illness and made a difficult decision to withdraw from. His health prevented him from touring. It is no longer bearable. But he made it obvious. He wasn't leaving the band, and he ready to record and play at a stationary participate in any events. Activities did not need considerable travel. Only 24 hours later, Mötley, the team declared to the media that Marshad retired and would be replaced by John 5. There is no discussion, no negotiation, just a cold announcement. Mick Mars, he realized he had been forced out, and this time, he elected not to remain mute. In early 2023, Mars filed a lawsuit against the band at Los Angeles Superior Court. He blamed his old bandmates. Nikki Sixx, Vince Neil, and Tommy Lee have conspired to remove him from his commercial interests, compelling him to sell. He owns 25% of the corporation. That has control of the Mötley Crüe brand, lowball pricing. Mars also requested full access to the band's financial records, which he claimed had been deliberate. Hidden for years. Revelations in the lawsuit was explosive. Mars accused Nikki Sixx, not actually playing bass live on tour with all bass tracks are pre-recorded. He also asserted that many of Vince Neil's vocals, Tommy Lee's drums depended on backup tracks. Mars said that Sixx abused him, influence, and minimized Mars' powers, and led the drive to declare unfit to execute in order to seize his stake. It wasn't simply about financial betrayal. Mars also confronted personal humiliation. He was derided for his age, for his health status, even for his private relationships. The place he once referred to his musical family, now become the force attempting to eliminate his very existence. The band fired back, alleging that, according to past agreements, any member who withdraws from touring forfeited their portion of the tour revenue and related activities. They contended that Mars was no longer qualified. Remain. However, for Mars, it was more than just about the money. It was about dignity. It concerned the right to be recognized. For a legacy he had sacrificed, he wants to improve his health and life. After months of legal fights and a partial Mars had a better chance for victory. The court ordered Mötley Crüe to pay legal fees for delaying the release documentation and affirmed his right. Access the band's business records for up to 2022. The legal battle has yet to summarize. Mick Mars made one thing clear. He won't remain mute and allow what he deserves is taken away. Even if he stands alone, even though he is. Despite being abandoned, he will continue to battle. He has fought throughout his life. Rebirth with a solo career, leaving Mötley Crüe. Mick Mars' story did not end there. It was the beginning of the most. Crucial, he is scripting his own career tale. Life tale. Shortly after the lawsuit against Crüe disappointed, Mars silently returned to his private studio in Nashville. No more burdened by image and commercial expectations or market trends, he decided to do something he hadn't managed to do in more than 40 years. A pure Mars solo album, unadulterated, uncensored. The album, titled The Other, the official release date for Side of Mars, was date February 23, 2024. From the title alone, Mars sent a clear message. This was one side of him. The public had never seen this before. The record took nearly 4 years to complete. Mars personally participates in every stage, from songwriting to arrangements. He handpicks his collaborators. I brought in reliable pals and colleagues. Paul Taylor, formerly keyboardist for Winger, and Alice Cooper, co-wrote numerous tracks and played a vital role. Part in determining the musical structure. Jacob Bunton, former member of Lamb Adler, handled the majority of the lead vocals. Bringing a fresh but highly emotional contribute your voice to the project. Furthermore, the album included Ray Luzier, drummer for Korn, added force to several tracks. The rhythm section. Produced by Michael Wagner, the same person who had worked with Mötley Crüe in Too Fast for Livera, the album remained raw, unrefined spirit, free of excess gloss. Musically, the other side of Mars. I did not follow the old hair metal formula. Mars. Mixed strong rock with blues. Rock, with undertones of current industrial and elements. Songs such as Loyal to the Lie. Right Side of Wrong is presented. His talent to write riffs remained as harsh as ever, hefty and frigid, but still deeply emotional. Ballads are like recollections. Exhibited another side. A Mick Mars imbued with reflection and maturity, hard-won wisdom. Throughout, the guitar tone on Mars' record was unmistakable, thick, black, and profoundly deep. His solos didn't showcase dazzling technicality. They focus solely on real emotion, something Mars has always prized more than speed or showmanship. In rare interviews, Mick Mars stated clearly, "I'm not trying to, sounds like anyone else. I do not have anything to prove. I just want to play." To be honest, without apologies. The CD has earned high praise from rock critics, with many naming it one among the most realistic works by a veteran artist has come out this decade. With the other side of Mars, Mick Mars accomplished what he'd never been able to throughout his years with Mötley Crüe, telling his own tale, completely controlling his music, his fate. No longer forced to hide, anyone's shadow no longer bears. The Mick Mars finally addresses the sorrow of silence. Stepped into the light completely on his own terminology. Personal life. Mick Mars' life offstage has never been as noisy as he played. Some music. It was quiet, complex, and full of empty. There were spaces that could not be simply repaired. At a very young age, before the Mötley Crüe even formed, Mars married his teen Sharon Deal, my sweetheart. Together, they Les Paul Deal had 2 children, following the famous guitar creator and Stormy Deal, who would eventually inherit her father's struggle with ankylosing spondylitis. But the difficult years of playing in inexpensive bars, along with the crushing weight of financial pressure, pushing the first marriage to its breaking point. The Mötley team began to Sharon left Mars after assuming shape. She took their children and left him. Alone, struggling with music and unpaid child support debts. At some time, if Mick Mars was hauled over by the cops, could be instantly imprisoned for unpaid child support. Friends of that period I recall having to come up with tricks loopholes to assist him avoid arrest occurs between tour stops. During the turbulent years, Mars fathered another son, Eric Deal, via a brief relationship with Marshall Martel, singer for a local band. However, Mick's absence throughout Eric's early years produced holes which would prove tough. 2. Bridge. As Mötley Crüe rose to stardom in the 1980s, Mars' private life remained equally fragile. In 1990, he married for the second time to Emmy Cannon, a background vocalist who had toured with the band. However, this marriage also collapsed after only 4 years amid internal band turmoil. And as Mars sunk deep into pain can be physical or emotional, marriages left him with more than merely financial losses. They have left remnants of memories, children he couldn't get close to. He was unable to keep his homes. It wasn't until 2007 that more than half, after his life was past, Mars discovered a different type of anchor. Serena Schonenberger is a Swiss model who has 3 decades his junior. They met afterwards, a show in Zurich. Serena was only 22 at the time. I was captivated to Mars's quiet, yet intense, the presence of an almost 60-year-old guy. Eyes still shone brightly. Behind blackness, sunglasses. In 2013, they got married for the first time. Mick Mars once had someone by his side. Not for fame or money, but just for who he was. They live in a discreet life in Nashville, away from the media. Distant from the old wounds of exhibition. Business. There, Mars writes music. He records and goes on calm walks with his young wife. Sometimes using a cane, sometimes it's just a thoughtful smile. His relationship with his kids, distance, continues to define it. Les Paul, the eldest son, maintains a tighter bond, continuing his father's musical legacy footsteps. Meanwhile, Stormy and Eric, they have chosen gentler lives, maintaining a particular distance from their father. In a rare interview, he was asked about Mick Mars, simply responded, "I regret the most. I lost out on too many things, can never come back. There are losses. They do not produce any noise. There are wounds. That cannot be measured by money or success." Under the steely exterior, Mick Mars' personal life involves a succession of silent crumbles and a monument to the calm power of a man who chose to, every time, I stand back up without saying anything. Current life and legacy. Stepping into in 2024, Mick Mars reached a new milestone. Throughout his career, on February 23, 2024, he released The Other Side of Mars, his first solo album, released under his own label, 1313 LLC, collaborated with MRI. This was a completely independent musical project, marking Mars's true return following his departure from Mötley Crüe. The record was quickly welcomed, positive feedback from reviewers and fans. Similarly, notable tracks like Loyal to the Lie, Undone, and Right Side of Wrong. In terms of style, The Other Side of Mars kept Mars' characteristic guitar tone is thick, chilly, and highly emotional, while adopting a more modern outlook. No Mars is no longer limited to traditional recipes. Freely blended conventional hard rock. With modern characteristics displaying at his musical style has evolved significantly. Thinking. Despite his age, he demonstrated. His creative spark was far from extinguished. Don't stop there. In 2025, Mick Mars admitted that he had already started working on his second solo album. He revealed the new project would be a step up from his debut, featuring a larger and more ambitious sound. To accomplish this, Mars partnered with engineer Chris Collier, known for creating modern recordings, while retaining the raw soul of the artist. Today, Mick Mars lives quietly with his wife, Serena. Schonenberger is in Nashville. Farther from the noise of the entertainment sector, he spends much of his time writing, recording, and focusing on his health. Continue to produce in silence without the requirement for stage lighting. Although he's undergone legal conflicts with Motley Crüe, Mars has not completely closed the portal to potential future collaborations. But his major priority, now it's his own career, a voyage. For the first time, he is truly control. What about Mick Mars's legacy, left behind more than heavy riffs and emotionally intense solos? He was helped shape the sound of Mötley Crüe Keeps the Band, rooted to its musical identity through its most. Those were turbulent years. His influence extends from hair metal bands in the 1980s to later hard rock artists, generations. Most importantly, the story of Mars is a story of resilience. An artist who overcame disease, age, and betrayal to continue playing and living on his own terms. Mickey Mars was never the face of Mötley Crüe. He wasn't the one. Hold the microphone, nor the one. The crowd was whipped into a frenzy, yet was he with his chilly, unrelenting guitar? Who kept the band anchored with a true for over 4 decades. I've been creating musical soul. Atan age when many have long ago stepped away from the spotlight. Mars persists. Writing, playing and walking forward on legs that appear to have been worn down by sickness. Without the need for acclaim, without appealing for pity, and silently exits. His mark follows his own course, a trip in which honesty and consistency are never compromised. The life of Mick Mars stands as a simple but strong testament. You don't need to be loud. Make a difference. Sometimes it's silence, endurance, and devotion to oneself that leaves the most lasting impression. Have you ever silently fought for something you believed in? What has Mick Mars been doing his whole life? If so, please share your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and enable alerts so you don't miss any more real-life stories as motivating as this one.